conduct outlines a shared commitment towards respect, inclusion, humility, safety, solidarity, patience, and openness for all participants and contributors. Today's session will be conducted in English and will be recorded. Please note that closed captioning is available and can be accessed by clicking on the Show Captions option in Zoom. Throughout the event, please feel free to ask questions by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We also invite you to please join us in a conversation on social media using hashtag IDW2025 and to please tag OCIC on your preferred platform. I would now like to begin and invite my colleague Negin to share OCIC's land acknowledgement.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nadine Kambij, and I'm working as the Special Projects Intern for OCIC. I would like to begin by sharing that OCIC recognizes and honors the Indigenous peoples who have historically and do presently live and work on the traditional both treaty and unceded territories that we operate on. These include the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nation, and many others. We acknowledge that our staff, board, volunteers, members, and broader community operate on the treaty and unceded territories of these and numerous other Indigenous peoples and nations. As we reflect on our role within a settler colonial context, we acknowledge the importance of naming the Indigenous peoples and nations on whose lands we live, work, and play, and understand the importance of framing our engagement in the international cooperation sector and beyond through the lens of reconciliation and decolonization. We recognize that we have a responsibility to stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples who have and continue to fight for social justice on their own lands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Negin. And to start off the event today, I am truly, truly excited and honored to welcome and introduce Senator Paulette Sr., who I actually had the privilege of meeting last November in one of our partner events organized by Spur Change. And it was such an inspirational speech listening to her, and I'm very, very happy that she agreed to be part of this conversation. And it's also a very special day for the senator as it marks her 1-year anniversary of being sworn in as a senator. So it's today, and congratulations, Senator. Truly, truly honored to have such an inspirational leader like you fighting for justice and equality. Senator Senior is a dedicated leader in gender equality with over 3 decades of experience advancing the rights of women, girls, and gender diverse people. As former president and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation and CEO of YWCA Canada, she has championed efforts to eliminate gender-based violence, reduce poverty, close wage gaps, and empower marginalized groups. Senator Paulette Sr. has also led shelters and housing programs in Toronto and served on several boards, including the G7 Gender Equality Advisory Councils in 2022 and 2024. She has received numerous awards, including the African Canadian Achievement Award and the Top 25 Women of Influence Award, and holds an honorary Doctor of Laws from the University of Lethbridge. Senator Paulette Sr., we're truly honored to have you today, and I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you so much. I just want to make sure you can see me.
No, Senator, it's actually the screening is black. If you're able to.
I seem to be having some difficulty with my camera this morning. I apologize, and I will fix that in a moment. But thank you so much for that kind introduction. I am indeed very, very happy to be here. I know the camera was working yesterday because I did a presentation, so I'm not quite sure why it's not working. Um, so please accept my apology. Um, I'm going to see if I could use um, my phone instead.
Senator Senior, it's no problem. We have your slide up with your photo.
Okay.
So of course, if you want to figure out your technology, that's fine. But otherwise, we can see your picture on the
Oh
slide.
dear. Oh, okay. The real thing is always so much better.
It is.
Okay, but thank you, and I appreciate that, and I'll keep seeing what I can do in the meantime. But let me begin by just saying, good day, everyone, from whatever time of the day you're at. Bonjour, bonjour à tous, to you all. I'm ever so pleased to be joining you, albeit virtually from the warmth of my home in this period of winterlude that we're having here in Canada. I come to you from Pickering, Ontario, and let me also add my land acknowledgement to the many Indigenous peoples that originally occupied where I live here, more specifically the Treaty and Traditional Territory of the Land of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation and Williams Treaty signatories of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations. I thank them for caring for these lands that today allows us to live, work, and thrive. I'm also grateful to my own ancestors because it is due to them enduring unspeakable conditions, including slavery and exploitation, but they survived. It is due to their strength and resilience that I'm still here today, not just surviving, but thriving myself. And in this context, I celebrate the successes of my ancestors, particularly during Black History Month as we build the futures we desire for our people. I'm thankful to the OCIC as well for inviting me to be the opening speaker today as you focus your attention on transformative leadership and equitable partnerships. I hope what I have to share will be a useful perspective as you reflect and engage in critical discussions that will address and chart the path forward for building the kind of feminist futures that will guide and possibly gird you in this time of geopolitical uncertainty and upheaval. And as I think about the work you're all doing in your regions and around the globe, I can't help but be inspired by the things that connect us as human beings, committed to improving, if not transforming, the lives of people in our communities and regions, for herein lies the foundation of building a better world for all of us, and for building a future worth living into. So for this, I thank you and pray for endless strength, peace, and resilience that will keep you going. Before I proceed, I thought I'd perhaps take a moment to share a bit about my path to the Senate of Canada, where I've been for actually a year today, as was mentioned. And, it's a space that I'm still navigating as I figure out the best way to use my voice, expertise, and presence to help build a Canada where all Canadians can be proud to call home. And as my bio states, my journey has taken me from being on the front lines of program development and delivery, working with economically disadvantaged youth, families, and communities in Toronto. This work changed me for good. It is where I discovered my passion and love for people by working alongside community leaders who themselves embodied a vision for themselves and families to build peaceful, thriving, and prosperous communities. Working at the grassroots taught me how to listen, follow, and learn from the folks I was hired to serve. I learned rather quickly that my ideas about their lives were irrelevant. They knew what they needed. My job was to facilitate and direct resources accordingly. Humility was one of the first lessons I put into practice in my own leadership journey. And decades later, this experience underpins the way I work and what I advocate for. It informs policies and initiatives I've worked on and continue to push for, including safe, affordable housing, to address issues around homelessness, particularly women's homelessness, affordable, accessible childcare, which is an important rung for gender equality, livable incomes to address poverty so that people can have wages they can live on, ending gender-based violence, which speaks for itself, I think, all ensuring that these remained priorities for government and community leaders and businesses to support and ensure the most vulnerable among us are able to reach and achieve their best potential. Following my frontline work, I was increasingly advanced to various management roles, which led me to assume the role of executive director at Yellow Brick House, CEO of YWCA Canada, and to my most recent post as president and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation, where I served for almost 8 years prior to becoming a senator. So I was not expecting, by the way, to be called on to be a senator when the opportunity came knocking. I had what seemed like a solid plan, which included retiring in a couple of years and volunteering my skills, particularly in the Caribbean, as I'm a proud child of Jamaica, and thus harbor a strong desire to give back. But there's a saying perhaps you've heard, when we plan, God laughs. Today, my life is not what I expected. It has been altered in unfathomable ways that words cannot describe. But I'm reminded every day that there's work to be done, and I have a role to play in continuing to stand up for justice and equality here and around the world. Being a senator is not a privilege I take lightly by any means. I'm aware that I have a voice, that I have access, that I have privilege, all of which I use to bring about the change necessary to advance a better world for everyone. In the Senate, along with my colleagues, I'm able to study new bills and legislation, explore issues and the impact on the lives of Canadians, give these bills and legislation sober second thought, and bring them into reality. This is no small thing, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute to my country in this way. And during this time of immense geopolitical upheaval here in North America and around the globe, all our voices, the collectivity of our voices and expertise are needed to fight for and insist on lasting peace, prosperity, and progress for all, now more than ever. So, what feminist futures are you building in your work? And what does it look like in action? I believe in working within frameworks that are truly collaborative, where we take the time to understand, to listen, to build trust, and to build it together. The work of true partnership calls on us to put aside old models and frameworks that presumed that those in need of resources were simply recipients, and those providing the resources held all the strings, and thus the power. This model is now being flipped on its head and being replaced by ones that recognize that resources are not just monetary. In fact, the resourcefulness of community partners is also accompanied by in-depth on-the-ground expertise and knowledge that is not easily accessed by those unaware and unfamiliar. Further, there's an inherent power in such partnerships that cannot be ignored, for it serves to level the playing field, thus engendering greater trust in the interactions and the relationship overall. Notably, this does not happen overnight. Building trust, being collaborative, building respectful partnerships require time and attention up front in order to reap the rewards later on. I'm reminded of the leadership roles I've had. I have stories, perhaps even battle scars to show for them. But what sustained me over the years was my ability to always lead with authenticity. Authenticity is a lovely word, no doubt. But for me, it meant being true to who I was and to the people I served and served with. Sometimes it meant admitting I had no answers for the problems we faced, but being confident that together we can create the solutions. Other times it meant leading from behind and not having to be out front and visible. That's hard for people who are in leadership roles, but it's something that we must practice. I believe this is part of being a feminist leader. Being authentic, being transparent, putting others forward, and understanding that leadership is about sharing power. This work takes courage, but it is the same courage that brought us into this work in the first place, the work of changing lives, the work of building communities, and bringing about systems change. This requires extraordinary commitment, the kind that gets you up every day, confident that the work you're doing makes a difference, even when you don't see it. But we have been making progress. I've been a witness to the changes being made, and I'm sure you have as well. The evidence lies in the pushback that we're seeing around the globe today, in the geopolitical uncertainty in places we would least expect. Here in Canada, we've made gains in addressing issues of racial injustice for Indigenous, Black, and racialized people. We have much farther to go, but the gains have been made. After 50 years of advocacy, we finally have a national childcare program, which needs work, but we did it. We're finally seeing poverty reduction for the most vulnerable families. We've got a ways to go, but we're seeing that. Legislation is now in place to prevent innocent individuals, especially Black and Indigenous folks, from wrongful convictions. This is a big deal. I had the honor of being on this committee, the Justice Committee that brought this about. So we're seeing greater equity, we're seeing diversity and inclusion in employment and in leadership positions. And it's not a straight line, by the way, because in this time of geopolitical uncertainty and pushback, we're also seeing some of these gains being lost. So the pushback is indeed real. Efforts are on the way to dismantle the progress and go back to the way things were. What these efforts signify is that we're in a battle, one that stands for a world that is just, equitable, and fair, against one that has thrived on some people making it at the expense and subjugation of others. This tells me that we cannot afford to ease up in any way. Instead, these times require us to work smarter and more collectively, with the confidence that someone else's freedom and economic prosperity is inextricably tied to our own, to my own, no matter where in the world they are. It reflects, in fact, it's the South African belief in Ubuntu. I am because you are. And not just in theory, but in practice and in reality. What's clear is that when we stand together as transformative leaders with clear purpose and conviction, we inspire each one, and we inspire one another, and others are also inspired to follow suit. It's what we need today as the pushback grows in intensity. Leaders in the global south have always known this to be true, because as I reflect on the upheaval now taking place in North America, they're not new to many places in the world where leaders have had to endure and still carry out their work, sometimes in life-threatening environments. The word that comes to mind is resilience. And make no mistake, resilience comes from suffering. It is also a lovely word, but we also have to acknowledge that resilience is built because we've had to survive unspeakable challenges. So I am really, really pleased that OCIC is focusing on this topic today, that you're looking at the way you're working together with your partners around the globe, and that you're not just doing it in theory, but that you're putting it in practice. So while theory is important and it gives us an understanding, it does not bring about the material change unless we actually put it in practice. And really looking at the partners that we work with as a source of solidarity and community, where we can outlast bullies and fear-mongering that we see in places and spaces today, particularly in politics. Now more than ever, we need to stand up for what we believe in, for the values that were read earlier, for the commitments, the principles of work, and establish those like a mantra as a way that we work with one another. Because the more we can do that, I think the more success we'll have. And the work that your organizations are doing is particularly endemic of that. It's a great example of how this work has happened. And really, at the end of the day, what we're doing is building a movement of solidarity, a way of transformative leadership, the kind of leadership that feminists provide. So thank you very much for having me. I think my time has come to an end, but I really appreciate the opportunity to engage with you this morning. I'll take some time to listen in to the other speakers, but I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you, and I wish you the best for the rest of your time together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. That was such an emotional thing to listen to, and thank you for your inspirational words, and again, the unwavering commitment for justice, equality, and transformative leadership. And now more than ever, like you said, we must stand firm in our values and commitments, making them not just principles, but a mantra that guides our actions. You reminded us through what you just shared with us, true leadership is about solidarity, trust, and ensuring that those who are impacted have the power and resources to shape their own futures. So thank you so much for these inspirational words. It's truly going to shape the conversation that we're going to have with our panelists. And as we move forward to this conversation, we're going to keep your words and reflect on it. And hopefully we'll encourage us all who's present here today to lead with authenticity and build equitable partnerships, and also to continue the work of creating a more just and inclusive society. So thank you so, so very much for sharing your wisdom and for all that you do, Senator. And congratulations again on your first year anniversary.
Thank you, Shahara. Thank you so much. And I apologize for my camera not working, but I will listen in as you continue your program. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. And with that, I think that's a perfect segue for us to go into our amazing panel. To introduce the panel, I would like to pass it on to Marlon Mondeka. Marlon Mondeka is the moderator for the event and for the panel. She is also a feminist leader and a strategist with over 25 years of experience in the international aid sector. She has worked with Oxfam and Save the Children, where she managed complex development and humanitarian programs with a focus on human rights and gender equality. As Director and Chief of Programs and Policy Officer at Save the Children, she oversaw the international and national reconciliation programs. Marlon was also a special advisor to the CEO on strategy and thought leadership, where she authored papers on localization, the triple nexus, and climate change. Since 2021, Marlon has co-chaired Corporation Canada's Localization Working Group, and since 2024, Canada's Food Security Policy Group. She is also co-chair of the Independent Review Panel of Accountable Now. And in 2023, Marlon joined Canadian Feed the Children, who is our member, as Vice President of Programs and Partnerships, leading both international and Canadian Indigenous programs. She holds master's degrees in political science and journalism. And with that, I pass it on to you, Marlon.
Thanks, Shahara, and thanks for allowing me to be part of this conversation today. I'm really honored to be moderating this session. Before introducing the panelists, I wanted to start off with a quote and a framing of feminist leadership, which I think is relevant given the state of the world, which I think Senator Paulette Sr. has really highlighted. We're in the midst of a lot of political, economic, and social upheaval. And we're being confronted by power dynamics being exhibited by leaders worldwide, which are fostering fear, division, and hatred. So the quote that came to mind was the quote by Jonetta Cole, who is an African-American intellectual. And it says the following: we need a new vision, a new definition of power and leadership. We must go away from the old model towards one of creative cooperation on our small and threatened planet. The world needs women to imagine, define, and lead us towards a sane and sustainable culture, a culture of soul, a culture that values life more than war, people more than profits, and hope more than despair. I thought that was a really beautiful quote, especially given the times. And I think it speaks to a lot of what Senator Senior highlighted in terms of what feminist leadership is about. So let me just take a moment before I introduce the panelists to frame what feminist leadership is all about. And that is, at its most basic, it's a commitment to creating alternatives to traditional hierarchical leadership models. It is an alternative to traditional male forms, or what we call patriarchal leadership, which reinforces the dynamic of dominance and subordination, which makes power a zero-sum game. If I get some, there's less for you. Feminist leadership seeks to transform that dynamic. It tells us that we can become powerful by making those around us feel empowered, able, and respected. It seeks to build power with others instead of power over others. It is characterized by compassion, openness, and accepting our own vulnerabilities and the vulnerability of others. It is inclusive and courageous. Feminist leadership doesn't have a fixed definition or a step-by-step guide. It is an ongoing process of learning and unlearning, both individually and together. Today is a day of learning. We have with us 4 amazing feminist leaders who will share with us their experiences of leadership and inclusive partnerships as key drivers of social change. Before I introduce them, I do want to acknowledge that we had invited to be with us today Gulnora Mukhammadeva, Global Lead of Gender Equality and Civil Society with the Aga Khan Foundation. But due to the passing of His Highness Prince Karim Al Husseini, the 4th Aga Khan, she could not be with us today. We want to extend our deepest condolences to his family, the Ismaili Muslim community in Canada and around the world, and the Aga Khan's Foundation's management, staff, and volunteers as they mourn the loss of a great spiritual leader and philanthropist. So now let me get to why we're all here today, which is to hear from these amazing women who are leaders in their own communities. Let me start off by introducing Elizabeth Kimigisha, who is the Advocacy and Communications Manager for the Ugandan Association of Women's Lawyers, or FIDA. She will share her experiences with FIDA, highlighting the importance of shifting power to communities and fostering sustainable change through mutual respect and locally driven solutions. Then we will hear from Dr. Rubel Manivanan, Project Manager of Regions Beyond Medical Union Society. She will focus on the challenges faced by marginalized communities in Bihar, India, and the Kuranas Project's efforts to combat gender-based violence. Then we will have Shopa Shrestha, Executive Chair of Women for Peace and Democracy in Nepal. She will focus on WPD's Nepal's efforts in gender equality and women's economic empowerment, emphasizing the role of feminist leadership and partnerships in overcoming systemic challenges. And finally, we will hear from Dr. Felagot Tadesse, Country Manager of Canadian Physicians for Aid and Relief in Ethiopia. She will highlight CPAR's work on health challenges, gender equity, and leadership, and will share insights on the intersection of conflict, economic barriers, and gender-based violence. The structure of today's conversation will be as follows. We will have 3 rounds. The first round, I will be posing 2 questions to all of the panelists. Each panelist will have 6 minutes. And then we will have a second round with an additional question, and then we will open it up for questions and answers. So we will start. The first question, I will be directing it to Shopa Shrestha, Executive Chair of Women, Peace and Democracy in Nepal. And it is as follows. Shrestha, can you share your stories of leadership and partnership, highlighting your own personal journey and any experiences you want to highlight in this journey?
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and namaste, everyone. Thank you, Marlene, for the kind introduction. Really appreciated it. Well, it's an honor to join this esteemed gender panel during International Development Week. I represent Women for Peace and Democracy, an organization dedicated to advancing gender equality, feminist leadership, and equitable partnerships. My deepest gratitude to OCIC for this platform and to all my national and international partners for their continued support. Well, I'm very passionate of feminist leadership, which I believe is a powerful tool for transformation, a force for change. For the last 25 years, I've worked with Dalit and marginalized women, girls living in rural communities of Nepal, supporting them in becoming leaders and decision makers in their communities. Because I believe that feminist leadership is the foundation of community development, and empowering women paves the way for change. I have had the opportunity to witness firsthand empowerment change lives. how empowerment changes lives. I remember women learning to sign their names for the first time, realizing they had an identity of their own. Many came from backgrounds where they were treated as less than human, denied basic freedoms. Given that marriage often happens in Nepal as early as age 12 or 14, some women have spent their entire lives confined to a single room, forbidden from speaking to anyone outside the households. I worked with these women, teaching them to sign their names, and that we are human beings, worthy of dignity and rights. This is just one episode in life dedicated to creating peace and justice. Like many women in Nepal, I was fortunate who did not have to grow up in such horrific conditions. But once I learned about the inhuman treatment of women across rural communities, I decided to dedicate my life's work to changing it. In 2009, while developing socioeconomic empowerment programs for women in South Asia Partnership Organization, I met David Barth, then director of World Accord, but later, when I did not find the organization environment supportive for women, I decided to leave the organization. My organization was when I was working. Then World Accord suggested that my work would be enhanced by establishing a women-led organization. Therefore, with the funding support of World Accord, we founded Women for Peace and Democracy Nepal in 2010 to promote gender equality and peace. And because of the partnership, I would say Equitable partnership, who believes in feminist leadership, who values local expertise for sustainable development. That's why I could be here today. For this, I remain deeply grateful to David and the entire team of World Accord.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe I could just follow up, because there's the first section is a two-part question. If you could also just reflect on you told us a little bit about your journey and the work that you do at a grassroots level and the impact that you've seen that it has. But would you be able to reflect a little bit on the particular context we're living in and the increasing challenges that you face in terms of partnerships in a context of shrinking civic space and the backlash that we're experiencing against feminist movements?
Yeah, thank you. Definitely. Advancing feminist leadership we face a lot of challenges, especially in the country like ours, which is so deep-rooted, patriarchy, traditional norms. It's very difficult to take initiatives to address gender equality. Like any other organization, we face challenges too. Our women groups are breaking barriers and challenging societal norms, leading to numerous stories of transformation. However, despite we have made significant progress, but many still obstacles persist. The deep-rooted patriarchy, intersection inequalities like caste and ethnic discrimination we have, which creates further marginalization, and unfortunately, we have political instability hinders our efforts. While advocating for gender equality, we often face threats and intimidation, especially when we enter new communities. We encounter backslash for challenging societal norms. They perceive our work as an anti-culture or Western-driven or donor-driven, or we are working for dollars. This misperception makes it more difficult to gain local acceptance and sustain advocacy efforts. Again, women in leadership roles struggle with societal expectations that prioritize their roles as caregivers over decision makers. So this dual burden limits their full participation in governance and public life. Further, the restrictive legal frameworks and shrinking civic spaces impose bureaucratic hurdles on civil society organizations, making it very, very difficult for us to operate. Sometimes it's very, very discouraging. And again, we know everyone limiting funding and shifting donors' priorities. And because of short-term funding cycles, worsen these challenges again. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Shilpa. I think you've given us a good understanding of your journey and some of the challenges that you're facing. I'd like to now pass on the same two questions to Elizabeth Kimigisha from FIDA in Uganda. Elizabeth?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. And kindly allow me speak without my video. I hope everybody can hear me.
We can hear you well.
Where I am. Right, so good evening. I'd like to first really say that I'm honored to be participating in this extremely important conversation on transformative leadership and equitable partnerships. And of course, because we are talking about a 2030 agenda for sustainable development, because we are talking about core values like equity, like justice, like solidarity, which are key. And while listening in from the senator, I just thought for us, or for me, even on a personal level, what has been important has been the issue of integrity and trust in the conversations that we are having, whether on a personal level, in my leadership journey, whether it's about the different feminist relationships or the different relationships we have with our different partners that we're initiating, that we are nurturing, that honesty, integrity, that trust has been at the core of almost everything that has been going well. I think what I could specifically share about my journey as an individual. So FIDA being an NGO that is women-led, that associates itself with the feminist values of doing work, of course, has also been at the core of pushing for women in leadership positions in the institution. That yes, we are women lawyers, but it's important that young women lawyers are taking up leadership positions. They're making decisions at management level. And I think for me, this is a thing that I have got to experience through FIDA, that while I joined FIDA about 5 years ago as an officer that was in charge of advocacy at the institution, that I've had to grow over the ranks. And what has been important for me has been honesty, trusting that someone is able to run with the ball and do what they're meant to do. Issues of integrity, being trusted to do the right thing even when no one is watching, which I know is important as we talk about feminist relationships, feminist partnerships, but also if we're talking about the transformative kind of leadership that we would like to see either at institutional level for us at FIDA or in the different even partnerships, coalitions, movements that we are part of, being able to see that we are part of global movements around holding companies accountable for the work that we do, for us to be able to have the partnerships that support us at that level has taken a bit of time, but I think it has come from a recognition that integrity and trust have been at the center. I think I want to mention that along the journey, feminist leadership has been sort of the catalyst for this change. So feminist leadership from institutions like FIDA, who are in the Global South, that usually receive funding opportunities from mostly institutions in the Global South. So seeing feminist leadership in some of the partners, some of the philanthropic foundations that are supporting some of the work that we do, it's been essential in fostering solidarity, equity, but also seeing inclusive decision-making at all levels, co-creation of projects where we do work, being trusted to deliver, to enhance voices of communities, being trusted to lead advocacy initiatives at certain levels has been core. Also, I think to speak about my journey, but also the journey of the institution, allow me just mention that FIDA last year made 50 years, and we were the first legal aid service provider in Uganda, and we're an affiliate of FIDA International. And for the last 50 years, when we were reflecting on our journey, one of the things that came out very strongly was what really mutual respect and shared knowledge looks like between the relationships that we have with our development partners, but also between the relationships that we do have with our communities. How are we representing communities, if there are spaces where we represent communities in a manner that is a true reflection of their voices? How do we work and walk alongside with communities in a manner where they feel that there's mutual respect for their language, for their culture, for their way of life, and that they feel that there's no external organization coming in with all the legalese to change how everything works. What for me we've seen from these partnerships has been, challenging that traditional power dynamic between us and the groups, between us and our partners. And in Uganda, we have seen that when local knowledge is recognized, we move away from the often top-down development approaches that have really failed a lot of marginalized communities, not just the women, but also children's rights movements in Uganda, queer people's rights movements, the abortion rights movement in Uganda. So because local knowledge is not recognized, we've seen that there've been rollbacks or there've been slow progress in terms of pushing forward the agenda. But also what we have seen along the way has been building movements rather than implementing projects. So recognizing that in whatever projects that we are undertaking, whatever initiatives are getting funded at the moment, that we go away from, calling people the names we use around, beneficiaries, feeling people, calling them, beneficiaries is one of the things, but also going away from results framework, indicators, looking at human beings as indicators, to achieve this 3-year goal that you have, and then you move away from it. So what we've seen along the way is that this kind of model that we are trying to, nurture has strengthened grassroots leadership in a sense, because we see the value in local knowledge, but also we see the value and the potential which is there in having grassroots, quote unquote, lead the way for us in some of the initiatives that we undertake.
Elizabeth, we can't hear you.
Hello?
Hi, sorry, Elizabeth, we couldn't hear you for a little bit there. You cut out.
All right. So I was just mentioning that I want to note that the Ugandan Parliament, for example, right now is discussing the marriage bill, a conversation that began before I was born. This conversation began all the way back in 1989 or thereabout, and I wasn't even born. And it's a conversation that a law that we are still pushing right now when we are organizing with groups. And what we've seen with the kind of feminist shifting back the power to communities is that we have been the movement, the work that we're doing, the policy advocacy sort of looks relatable. Like the examples we're giving are people that you can look at, that when we say recognize cohabiting partners and the property rights therein for women in cohabiting relationships, because usually they are the most vulnerable there. They are actually women in cohabiting relationships right there ready to tell their stories. And these women, are not trained. They are not, they're just simply told, we are doing this, and they're able to just sort of jump and share their experiences. So for us, we've seen that in a way it has strengthened grassroots leadership in seeing that women activists see themselves as part of the movement, as leaders in the movement, as, key players in seeing social change in their communities, other than being looked at as vessels through which, we just come and invest and then go away. And in closing, I just wanted to say that it's one of the things that I also want to share about my experience as a leader in the CSO movement back home in Uganda, but also in line with the conversation we are having right now, is recognizing especially young women and young feminists and recognized groups and registered groups as those that actually also have voices that are important to listen to. Because of how the funding ecosystem looks like, usually NGOs that are registered, groups that are registered and recognized in their national communities, in their national, level, are those that will usually competitively, be in conversations about funding, in conversations about co-creation of projects. But the power in these unrecognized, in the informal groups, in individual young women, is that they are fresher, innovative ways. There's a lot of resilience. There's a lot of sense of urgency because of the intersectional way that we are experiencing resistance, the way the status quo is treating young people right now. has sort of ignited that spirit of urgency, which is extremely important if we are to talk about transformative leadership, if we are talking about shifting power back to communities, because one of the key things we have to do, especially as CSOs in the Global South, is to make demands. We can no longer keep quiet. We can no longer assume that the documents that partners share is are the only ones through which we can communicate. It's now extremely possible that you're having conversation with a potential donor before you write a concept, before you go down to, getting into the budget, that you're having conversations about what's possible and what's not possible, methodologies that are more context related for the spaces and communities and countries where we come from. So the powers of these very resilient, extremely innovative young women's voices have been a testimony for us the last 50 years. So very jumbled and a lot and a mouthful, but I do hope that in there you're able to tell the story of me as an individual feminist young woman who joined an association of women lawyers with all the challenges that women lawyers still face in countries like mine, to make it to managerial positions. But also, I hope that you're able to just take a minute to read up on our 50-year journey, which is really a testament to what true collaboration looks like, what meaningful partnerships are, but also what solidarity looks like, especially in times of turmoil, in times when we are unable to have our voice heard as individual institutions. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Before passing it on, I do want to just maybe give you one additional minute, or maybe two, to kind of maybe just talk a little bit about, you've talked about some of the key tenets of, leadership within the organization and the importance of integrity, honesty, authenticity, like Senator Paulette Sr. mentioned, as traits that are essential in terms of transformative leadership. Would you be able to also just maybe talk a little bit about what are some of the challenges you face in terms of being able to do the work? Shralpa talked about social norms and civic space and funding constraints. What are some of the challenges? Maybe mention two challenges in 2 minutes, if you can, that you're facing.
Yeah, so one of the challenges is actually the changes in the global context really affect countries like Uganda, and you might wonder why it's unique. I'll just mention that currently Uganda, through our National Development Plan 4, is leading what they call a private sector-led economy. So there's a lot of preference and prioritization of the needs of the private sector. And for anyone that has been in this work for a minute, you know that the private sector's interest is profit at the expense many times of lives of people, especially women, young people, indigenous groups, sexual minorities, persons with disabilities, and etc. So because of that, we have faced a challenge with what happens at the global level, what's happening right now in the USA, what was happening between Russia and Ukraine, has a very deep connection with what happens back home because of that foreign influence that we have. Right now that we have USAID cut, our health sector is shaking because we are not very sure of where funding is going to come from right now for a lot of services that are related to HIV, a lot of services that are related to the intersectional needs of refugees and asylum-seeking individuals here in Uganda. And this is, for us, is critical because we, I think, the biggest hosts of refugees currently in Africa as a country. So that's extremely important for us. Another is, I think, the changes in priorities, right? I share an opinion that for some development partners, it's become extremely important that you align with what their priorities are. Right now, many times the priorities, their accountability mechanisms, their monitoring and evaluation mechanisms, the collection of success stories and voices from communities may not truly align with what your mission and vision is, may not align with the strategic priorities of an institution, at the moment. And that affects a lot of organizing around social movements. Yet, it's very clear for a country like Uganda right now that an institution like FIDA cannot do it alone. We have to keep collaborating with private sector. We have to keep collaborating with other feminist institutions that are doing this work, because also the resources are not a lot. So if we bring the small ones together, then we have a lot more resources to work with. And then lastly, but not in any way least, I also want to emphasize cultural and religious norms, which we just experienced yesterday. We were appearing before the Committee on Gender in the Parliament of Uganda to present our recommendations to the marriage bill. And you could tell the undertones from the members of parliament on where, for example, issues, their stance on polygamy, where it comes from, their stance on how women utilize their partners' names that are males' names, things to do with catering to children after separation and etc. You could tell the undertones of patriarchy, the intersection between patriarchy and capitalism and etc. So cultural norms and religious norms still continue to really block a lot or really reduce our speed at which a lot of change happens in especially most of the rural areas. Yet those are the places where we see a lot more cases, and which makes the need for our work necessary to organize with communities. So I hope those three can sort of answer your question.
No, that was excellent. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Great overview of your own personal journey, of the work of the organization, and some of the challenges that you're confronted with. I want to kind of now pass it on to Dr. Rubel Manivanand, who is the project manager from Regions Beyond Medical Union Society, to tell us about her journey and to also talk about some of the challenges she's faced with in her work.
Thank you, Madeline. It is a privilege indeed for me to be a part of this panel. And thank you for that warm introduction as well. So a very good evening to everyone from India. And today, as I sit here, I want to take you on a journey through my leadership experience with the Karuna project, which also means compassion in Hindi, which I've had the privilege to lead in Bihar at the Duncan Hospital, which is a mission hospital, working for the poor and the marginalized in rural India. So this project is very deeply personal to me because it tackles entrenched gender disparities that shape the lives of countless women and girls in one of India's most underdeveloped states. Our mission is to empower girls and women, foster gender equality, and create opportunities where there were none. In order to understand why this is important, we have to know why Bihar is such an underdeveloped state, because it faces critical gender-related challenges like low female literacy, high rates of child marriage, prevalence of human trafficking, skewed sex ratios, minimal workforce participation by women, and financial dependence of women on the male counterparts, and pervasive gender-based violence. In our project area, nearly 80% of the girls are forced into early marriage at the age of 12 years, leaving them vulnerable to human trafficking and sexual exploitation. And these are the roots which run deeper, like the causes for that are poverty, illiteracy, dysfunctional family dynamics, weak law enforcement, and cultural apathy towards exploitative practices. So leading Karuna project has been both challenging as well as transformative for me. Our approach stands on three major pillars: education, economic independence, and community engagement. We support underprivileged girls through educational sponsorships in order to break the cycle of early marriage and dependency. But education alone is not enough because most of the girls drop out at a young age and succumb to early marriage. And hence, for that, we have established vocational training centers where girls learn skills like tailoring and beautician, fostering both self-reliance and confidence in them. Take a story of Radha, for example, who was destined for early marriage and succumbed to widowhood at the early age of 18 with her three children, put out from her in-laws' house and nowhere to go. And she had no economic sustainability because she had no education. But she learned tailoring, and now she is not only able to earn her own income, but also inspires others in her community with her independence. Our nutrition program is one such activity which tackles malnutrition because it's a silent crisis disproportionately affecting girls, because more sons are preferred than the daughters, and their health and nutrition is always neglected, and they are the last to eat in their households. We also support women's self-help groups to start small business, shifting household power dynamics and giving women a voice in family decisions. Gender sensitization workshop amongst the adolescents and community members have really played a key role in changing the mindset. For example, if you take the story of Anil, who comes from a very patriarchal and a male chauvinistic family, who was once dismissive of our gender equality, is now become an advocate and advocating for his sister's right. The similar stories of Chanda and Ratamala, who have become advocates in their own communities to stand against child marriage and domestic violence and ensure safety of the women in their community, especially their mother and sisters, and are now pursuing education as one of the few stories. Many parents who have attended these workshops have understood what gender stereotypes and what gender discrimination uh, ruins the lives of the girls, and they have also have had to understand the value of educating the girls and have fought against societal norms to get the girls educated. And all these stories are an inspiration, and they challenge stereotypes. These are not just statistics, but they humanize data and mobilize support. They remind us that behind every statistic is a life transformed, a potential realized, and sharing these stories amplifies the voices of those often unheard, ensuring that their struggles and triumphs shape the global narrative on gender equality. So, Karuna Project is not just about interventions, it's about a belief in every girl who's told she can't, every woman who is made to feel invisible, and every boy taught that strength is about dominance rather than respect. And transformative change does not happen in isolation. It happens when individuals, communities, and institutions come together with a shared purpose. So, our work in Bihar is one part of a larger movement of gender equality, but every step counts, every voice matters, and every story needs to be heard. And hence, advocacy and sharing these stories are very critical and important.
Thanks, Dr. Rubel. Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing, and telling us about the critical work that you're doing to impact, individuals at a community level, and to really emphasize the dignity of every girl, every woman, and, by equipping them with key skills and knowledge. I do want to give you a couple of minutes to also reflect on some of the challenges that you face in your work. Whether those have to do with funding or kind of shrinking civic space. You talked a little bit about the cultural and social norms, which obviously are a barrier and something that you're constantly encountering as a challenge. But just want to give you the floor for a couple of minutes to expand potentially around some of the challenges that you encounter.
So the challenges that we encounter definitely is one of the thing is because we are in a male chauvinistic country, if I can say that, and we have this patriarchal mindset. So backlash to the feminist movement is very high, and they always see that we are, you know, uh, creating a ripple effect, or like Shobha was telling, we are bringing in ideas from Western culture, and women are supposed to be at home and they are supposed to be devoted to the household chores. So when we try to advocate for their education and their rights, they think that we are here to, ruin the culture and the sensitivity of it. So, and it becomes very difficult for us at times to advocate and, voice out our concerns. And this backlash doesn't just affect policy, but it trickles down to communities and becomes more sensitive at times and even risky. And we also have funding constraints where sometimes donor priorities shift, and because of the new policy changes, it is very difficult to acquire funds overseas, especially in India, with the problems that are occurring in India as of now. And it becomes a challenge to sustain this long-term programs. And also in an environment where civic space are shrinking, it becomes harder for grassroots level organizations like us to voice our concerns and demand accountability. So these are the few challenges that we face. And I think one of the things which has helped us navigate this challenge is building strong community partnerships with the local leaders and fostering grassroots support from the community members, creating advocates and networking with them to amplify the mission even in this restrictive environments, and having a flexibility in funding strategies so that we can emphasize more on local resource mobilization. So this has helped us maintain the program continuity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rubel. And last but not least, I want to give an opportunity to Dr. Felagot Tadesse, who is the country manager for Canadian Physicians for Aid and Relief in Ethiopia, to talk a little bit about her work, her journey, and some of the challenges she's faced.
Thank you, Marlene, for the introduction. So I would like to start by thanking the OCIC for giving me this opportunity and reflecting my perspective on the topic, and also even for organizing this session, because I believe that such advocacy work, such platforms are really important in terms of bringing the change that we anticipate, at least for the next generation, for the upcoming feminist leaders and so on. So I'd like to appreciate that. So I'll start also with reflecting my personal experience in terms of my career and a few years of leadership experience. So I'm from Ethiopia, so probably for the attendees who might not be familiar, Ethiopia is one of the East African country where there is like more than 120 million population, and like 50% are female, more than 50% are female population. But unfortunately, it is one of the countries that have a significant gender inequality because of like a significant societal and cultural norms. So we really face many problems from the gender inequality. So I'll start to share just my personal experience. I consider myself as one of the fortunate one, because I think I'm privileged because I was raised and educated in the capital city of Ethiopia. I didn't face as much challenge that many of the women face in terms of access to education, employment, or other empowering opportunities. So in Ethiopia, majority of the women, 80% of the women are residing in the rural parts of the country, where they don't have access to this basic education, empowerment, employment, healthcare access, and so on are significantly limited. Some of the things are beyond imagination for someone who comes from developed nations and so on. So I consider myself as actually someone who is really privileged and have a responsibility of really supporting these communities, parts of the female community. So I have reasonable access to this opportunity, and so I have joined the medical school, did my specialty in obstetrics gynecology, and then I have also did my subspecialty in maternal fetal medicine, those focusing on high-risk pregnancy. So through this educational path and also clinical experience, so I have work experience of doing clinical experience of working in those remote areas, rural parts of the country. So that's where I learned really the effects of gender inequality, particularly in terms of its health effects. So I worked in the different parts of the country where you see daily gender-based violences, some traditional practices like early marriage, so that these girls who do not have the access for education. So you see many female in Ethiopia who cannot read, cannot write. So this limits their economic opportunity and other roles that will be significantly compromised. The female genital cutting is a problem that I saw in the rural parts of the country, early marriage, abductions, and also we see many preventable deaths, like teenage deaths from pregnancy-related deaths, and so on, which are really preventable, and so much frustration that causes so much frustration as a clinician. So I think the inspiration to be part of the leadership team, the public health team, and so on came from that. So I didn't want to be that clinician who works in the hospital, complains about this and so on. So I just decided to be part of the public health team, the leaders and so on, especially being female and after having seen these effects on females in these discriminated groups. So that's where I think the decision to join the leadership came. It was not easy actually. So I just decided and joined Canadian Physicians for Aid and Relief, initially as a technical person, technically supporting the different projects that focus on adolescent health, women's health, maternal health, and so on. So after a while, after working in the organization, now I'm now serving as a country manager to this impactful organization. So I would like to say a few things about the work we do and also what is peculiar about Canadian Physicians for Aid and Relief. So it's a long-standing international non-governmental organization. It operated in Ethiopia for nearly 40 years. And the main aim for the organization is to create a better healthcare system in Africa. It has other offices also in Tanzania and Malawi. And this is the main aim, but as an organization, CPAR is unique for me because the organization is really advocate for gender equality, and they really give opportunity, the organization give opportunity for equal access for both genders, but particularly supports and encourages women to be part of the organization. So this is like different from the different organizations we see in Ethiopia. So there are few organizations that you see females to be a leader, females to be part of the team. So usually we see that the male will be the leader and female will be given some roles just as a representation, but really CPAR is really advocate for women representation and gives really support for women to be part of the team. And besides that, we are really working in different projects focusing on this gender equality. We have recently concluded a 5-year project that's really focused on adolescent women reproductive and sexual health in the areas where these adolescents have limited access for the information, limited access to the care, and so on. So this is one of the success stories that I can mention, that the government really took some of the interventions, the impacts we made for scale up to other areas. So the project had like many interventions, but what I love about this project is the community engagement. So we are not just calling the females, the girls, and then teach them and then train them and so on. We just try to bring all the community, we try to engage male and so on. We try to see really change by involving the community and really understanding the local context. And we try to really work for every woman, adolescent in the remote rural parts of the country to have access to this sexual reproductive health, and which will have an indirect effect, obviously, for the woman empowerment and bringing the gender equality. So we mainly focus on gender-based violence, which is really a significant issue in Ethiopia. Probably if the audience is informed, there is like a recent crisis in Ethiopia, like conflict in different regions. So this has significantly increased the prevalence of gender-based violence. Unimaginably higher incidences being reported, and these survivors are not really getting the support they need and so on. And the prevention is not also being worked that much. And also I want to raise one important project that I really love working in CPAR. So we are also supporting high school students, the most disadvantaged high school students, either economically or with disability and so on. So we support these high school students in educating them about gender equality and their rights and so on. So we sometimes also invite influential women, and then they share their experience. And we found that this really to be influential. And these students are now being really champions. So they are now doing lots of things in the school. So you can imagine the number of students that they can have access, the stories they tell, the experience and so on, really is having impacts in both male and female students, and also for the teachers in the school compound. So this is like the things that I love, because like when you want to see like a better future, you have to work on what you have at present. And working as students is like in the younger generation is something that is really impactful. So like we had like made successful projects in terms of really improving the gender role in the most disadvantaged, like the rural women with disability, women with some chronic illness, and so on, were given priority. So we have made like successful projects, and the government has also taken some important interventions that we tried, we tested, and this is being scaled up to the other parts of the country. And generally speaking, CPAR, Canadian Physician for Aid and Relief, really is considerative for gender equity in terms of employment, and also in every project that we do, in everything, in every training, every activities we do, we try to give emphasis in gender equality.
Thank you, Dr. Felagat. Before moving into round two of our discussion, I wanted to just kind of maybe just give you a moment, maybe a minute or two, if there's any particular challenges. You mentioned conflict and the rise and the correlation between increased conflict and gender-based violence. In terms of other challenges you're facing, in particular in terms of partnership, would you be able to highlight maybe one or two challenges that you face in your work?
I think I also share most of the challenges that were raised by the other presenters. But I think in terms of the partnership and resource, so we see like there is like a significant, significantly inadequate funding for gender equality in Ethiopia, and there is like a limited capacity building for this gender-focused organization as compared to the others who are really focusing in other sectors. And I see also lack of alignment like among the different NGOs. So we do different things independently. So this will have a distribution of efforts, and it's not making a bigger impact. So there is an opportunity to collaborate and to work together. I think the impact will be very big. We try to solve everything independently, and that's I think one thing that will be a major issue that I want to raise. Otherwise, the other things are also raised. And the other issue that I always think is about the legal and the policy gap. So if you come, for example, in Ethiopia to the Women Affairs, like Ministry of Women Affairs, Children Affairs, and so on, you'll see like a very good documents, that just specifically tells everything about the law, the policy, the country direction, and so on. But actually, the implementation has significant gap because the decision makers are not females. Like even like the politician and so on really speaks about gender equality and so on their speech, but they don't give the opportunity for the females on the major decision making. So ultimately, so they are the one who decides on everything. So the implementation on the many of the direction and the issues are not on the ground. So I see that also.
Right. Yeah, the disconnect between the policy on paper and its actual implementation. So thank you so much to all of the panelists. I think that was a really great overview, and I personally learned a lot about each of you in terms of your own personal commitment to the work. But it struck me, despite the fact that each of you work in, different countries, different contexts, the commonalities of the work. All of you are working at that community level. All of you believe in the power of community organization and coordination, mobilization, and yet you're all faced with very similar challenges. So it really struck me that despite all of the advances and all that we've struggled for, in terms of the women's movement and across the globe, all of us are still struggling with social norms, cultural norms, policy environments that are not enabling funding limitations of funding and the funding relationships, right? A lot of you talked about that alignment of donors changing priorities, and how do you deal with that in the face that in your own context, there might be other priorities. So a lot of commonalities, a lot of richness in terms of what you've shared with us this morning. Before we open it up to questions, like please be thinking of questions, or if you have questions, put them in the chat. I do want to give one more quick round to all of the participants, all of the panelists, an opportunity to just share with us. They've talked about their journeys, they've talked about their challenges, but what are some of the strategies that they're using that have proven the most effective in terms of fostering, transformative, resilient collaboration? If they could just maybe each one of them take a moment to just think about that. And I will call on Elizabeth first this time to share what strategies she's used in her own journey and in her own organization in terms of collaborative relationships and partnerships. Elizabeth, are you with us? Okay, well, let's start with Dr. Rubel then. I'm going to call on you, Dr. Rubel. Would you be able to share what some of the strategies that have proven most effective in your work in terms of fostering resilient, collaboration and partnerships?
So talking about strategies, I think the first strategy which comes to my mind is, I think, building trust and open communication has been one of the bedrock for any collaboration. And in Bihar, where there is so much of cultural diversity and cultural dynamics are so integrate, we try to prioritize open communication with the community leaders, which has been a foundation for the success of our project, because all the beneficiaries, the community leaders, they're all on the same page, and there is open communication through various meetings and informal conversations with various stakeholders. So they also feel that we are hearing their voices, and we are adapting our own interventions based on what the community needs. So they don't feel that what we are actually advocating is not adaptable to the cultural dynamics. And I think we all have shared vision and goal, which is one of the next strategy which has worked in our project, because we all have a vision to advocate for gender equality, bring down gender discrimination, and voice out against gender issues. So we have a clear vision and goal through which we agree upon. And so there is no confusion. And we also try to bring in various stakeholders, like we have healthcare professionals in our own hospital, we have community members, we have vocational trainers. So they all together have and bring their diverse strengths, and each play a very clear role and have their clear responsibility, which also avoids confusion. And we all have the same vision and goal. So leveraging diverse strength, and we all have equitable partnerships, so that they all feel respected and welcomed, and community members also feel, especially the women who don't have a voice, feel that they are heard and their concerns are being addressed. So that is one thing which has also helped us and has been a success. The other thing is, I think, promoting flexibility and adaptability, especially if you see when formal education for the girls was very remote and it was limited, we pivoted to vocational training centers, and you know uh, equipping them with marketing skills. This has helped them grow in an economic way. So this proactive adaptability and flexibility which we adopt, especially in the scenario of funding constraints and the funding wiring problems that we have, has helped us overcome that obstacle. And
thank you so much, Dr. Rubel. I don't want to cut you off, but I'm looking at the time, and I do want to give space for questions and answers. You've given us 3 great strategies, and maybe the other panelists can build off of that. You talked about building trust. You talked about the importance of shared vision and goals, and the importance of flexibility and adaptability. Can I pass it on to Shilpa now?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, in our work, because we work with self-help groups or women groups, so we take these groups as platforms for collective advocacy, enabling women to influence, local policies, push for their rights. We encourage them to be connected with the local government and, pressurize them for the local policies. And in my experience, amplifying these diverse voices, like particularly those from especially from marginalized communities, strengthens advocacy efforts and fosters inclusive change. The second strategy what we use is because that economic security plays a crucial role. So we do economic empowerment. We strengthen women cooperatives. We introduce entrepreneurship programs, for financial independence. So that's so that the women, if they're economically independent, that will reduce their vulnerability to gender-based violence or social exclusion. And the third one is coalition building. Now we try to engage men and boys in our program activities just to avoid backslash, and this is very important. And encouraging male allies to challenge toxic masculinity and advocate for gender equality helps a lot for our work. So these kind of collaborative works also strengthens our movement. And the another one is, leveraging storytelling, like social media, like what we are doing today. Campaigns and women-led journalism is a powerful way to challenge stereotypes and reshape societal perceptions of gender roles. And also, when you showcase your success stories, women leaders not only amplifies their voices, but also inspires others to step into the leadership roles. So, and my organization, WPD, actively uses digital advocacy to shift narratives and highlight transformative impact of women's leadership. And the another one is advocacy for gender responsive policies by engaging with policymakers and local governments. I think I mentioned that before. And the another one is intergeneration mentorship. In the way we are now doing now, pairing young activists with seasoned leaders helps navigate challenges, provide strategic guidance, and ensure continuity in the movement. So implementing these kind of strategies really helps us to challenge the challenges we are facing to empower marginalized communities. Yeah.
Thank you, Shilpa. Dr. Felagot, could I invite you to share some of the strategies that have proven most effective in your work in fostering resilient, transformative collaborations?
So we have been using different strategies, so fostering this change. So one of the things is it's not like the independent work that we can do alone as an organization in making this change. So we really work on multi-sectoral collaboration, especially when you think about work that is done by non-governmental organization in our context. So there will be some project, and then after the project life, many of the things go back, and then nobody will take the responsibility of continuing the good things that were happening during the project time. So we always try to have a multi-sectoral partnership. So the Canadian Physician for Aid and Relief mainly focus on health-related projects, but we try to engage those sectors that can directly or indirectly affect the health sector. So especially while we are working on adolescent health, maternal health, and so on, we try to engage other sectors. For example, we are working closely with the Women's Lawyer Association, so they give free legal consultation and so on for those gender-based violence survivors. Can you hear me, please?
We can hear you.
Stuck for me.
Yeah, your video is stuck, but we can.
Am
hear
I audible?
You. We can hear you. Perhaps as Dr. Felagot sorts out the technical issue, we can pass it on to Elizabeth.
All right.
Elizabeth, are you with us? Elizabeth, the question was what strategies, we talked about the challenges, some of the challenges you face in terms of partnerships. But on the flip side of that, what are some of the strategies that have proven most effective in terms of fostering partnership?
Oh, all right. Thank you very much. I'll mention about 3 of them, and I think one of them is co-creation of initiatives, if I could put it. So co-creation of initiatives here, I mean, sitting down with communities to understand the roots, not just the symptoms of the problems that they have, not just, the challenge, but really understanding things from the root, because it has become very clear for us that if we do not address the root, then we are not going to address the problems that we are dealing with. And that for us has been one of the things that we've been doing. Another is a word I do not like to use. I feel it's very dehumanizing, very, power over, but really just allow me put it in quote unquote, that's beneficiary-led advocacy, where we do have willing victims of either a system that's not working, a health system that's not working, or victims of violence that have suffered some of the setbacks that are brought about by our judiciary having a few hiccups here and there, to have them present for themselves what their issues are. We've had instances where we get the real women activists from the different districts where we work to present to the committees in Parliament about what the situation is. And that creates a bit of a feeling of ownership of a lot of this work that we do. Another that we have seen is that also documenting of our success stories and the things that have worked. This has been very helpful in fostering relationships with the communities we work with, but also in nurturing the relationships that we have with development partners, just for partners to see the value in the funding, the value in the collaboration, for partners to be able to recognize what more do they add to FIDA outside giving me money to go and do work. That has also been something that a strategy that has helped us, for our development partners to see that there's value, there is growth of the institution outside the different project-based work that they do support. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that FIDA enjoys a dual identity. We are an association that brings together women lawyers in the country, but we are also a feminist women NGO. Right. So one of the things that we do under the mandate of being an association that brings together women lawyers is also doing a lot of mentorship, intergenerational mentorship between young lawyers that may be interested in social justice issues. And why this has helped us a lot with the work that we do is that we are seeing more and more lawyers picking interest in social justice issues, right? Which was not the case so much here in Uganda. So I could just mention those are some of the strategies that we have used to maneuver.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And with that, we conclude the 2 rounds of questions that, I wanted to just now open it up for questions from the audience. I think we've heard a lot of commonalities, challenges, even in terms of the strategies. I think, we heard of the importance of building trust, of shared visions and goals. The importance of intergenerational mentoring was mentioned by 2 of the panelists. The importance of storytelling, of documenting, coalition building, building male allies. These are all the strategies that the panelists mentioned, and there's a lot of commonality between them. So is there any questions, Shihara?
Yes, Marlon, we have it in the Q&A box at the bottom. We have 4 questions.
Let me just open them up here because I don't see them. Where is that? Or maybe you want to read it out?
Yeah, sure. So it's at the Q&A at the bottom. You will see Stephanie's.
Oh, here. Yes, I see it. Now I see. I was looking in the chat. So Stephanie, do you want me to read the question or do you want to just ask the question yourself? And maybe direct it, like identify who your question is directed to. Is it to all the panelists or to one panel in particular, one panelist in particular? Don't know whether Stephanie's still with us.
Oh, hi.
Hey, Stephanie.
It might be another Stephanie. I don't think I've added a question.
No, it's Stephanie Toland.
Yes, I am here.
Okay, do you want to
Sure,
ask?
I'm happy to say it. Excuse me. This is a question for all of the panelists. Thank you. In today's context, facing such honest and plain-faced discrimination and patriarchy from many leaders today, how do you speak back in a way that rallies solidarity amongst those who are not, hopefully yet, actively feminist or pro-equality? And this really relates to the comment about countering social norms and what we're facing.
Who wants to tackle it first? I'll leave it up to the panelists to decide. And if not, I will call on you. Dr. Rubella, you're next on my screen, so I'm going to call on you to start.
Sure. It's a very wonderful question. Basically, when we talk back to such people, instead of framing gender issues solely as a fight against patriarchy, we, for example, show examples of how, like, vocational training centers in Karuna project, and they gaining this skill will help improve the household income and economic stability. So even the men are able to understand, oh, okay, the additional income is going to come into our family, so it's a bigger picture, and it's for a bigger good. So that way they are able to understand that even if a girl gets educated or has these skills, it actually benefits the family. So that is one of the way which we advocate for girls having their rights, and also having men allies with us. We just don't see that men are our enemies or they are the ones who are dominating us, but having male advocates through our community engagements come and support female counterparts and say that they are also having equal rights, and they also help their female counterparts in household chores, and challenge these gender stereotypes, and creating such examples in the community is one of the way which we actually tend to help them uh, know that there are men who are supporting this, and having local leadership voice out and advocate for our own program is one of the key areas which has actually brought out a lot of changes, because once a local leader believes in gender equality and advocates, it becomes all the more community acceptable and culturally sensitive, because more people are ready to accept what the leader is saying. Because in a
Thank
country
you.
like India, where leaders are considered as gods, so that makes a very impact.
Thank you, Dr. Rubel. Shilpa, could I call on you to maybe build off of that? Maybe make it very short so we can have time maybe for one additional question.
Sure. Countering social norms is very, very challenging, but I can give you a small example how we did it and how we encountered. I said, it's not easy and it takes lots of patience, but you have to believe in yourself and believe in the women you work with. It takes time. And its main thing is when there's a counter, communication is the strategy, and you have to be patient enough to convince them that you are there for the community, not only for the women, but ultimately for the community. So I can give you a small example. I don't know if I have time. Like, I was working in one of the very remote district of Nepal, and where communication is also very difficult. And when I entered and was working with the women, the men came just stand outside the training hall and would not let me in, saying that he felt like I was manipulating or brainwashing the women, So he didn't want me to be there, and I was there for a week, and every day he used to come, then he used to look at me and as if he was like, he was hit me back. But slowly, then keeping the story short, after 2 months, when we had training, the same man, the spouse, we used to we used to drop his wife in the training center, and after her training was after training completed, he used to take the women back home. So these are kind of changes we have seen. It's because we are human being, and ignorant is because of the ignorance. We are talking about societal norms, but again, there's also ignorance. So if we can educate not only women, if we can educate men, local communities, local leaders, then we can challenge those kind of societal norms.
Thank you, Shilpa. I want to quickly just give a chance to Elizabeth or Dr. Felagot to add anything they want to add, and maybe that gives us time for an additional question. Did you want to add anything, Elizabeth or Dr. Felagot?
Not from me, Malan.
I think most of it is already mentioned. It's going to be an can go for another round.
Okay. Let's move on to an additional question. I mean, there's lots of good questions here. There's a question here from Susan James, and then I think there's a good question here around also how can partners in Canada support your work better? Shihara, how much time do we have for questions and answers at this point?
We have about 8 to 10 minutes. We can
Oh,
go
we
on.
do. Okay. So maybe 2 more questions we can do.
Yes.
Okay. So let's tackle the second question here. Susan James, are you still on the line with us? Susan? Okay, I'm going to move on from that question.
Okay.
Just wanna...
Yeah, go ahead.
Or you're here. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead and maybe I'm too verbose there. So
what do you want to quickly summarize your question?
Okay, I'm just thinking, I'm remembering 1984, beginning of the women's decade, or or maybe that was the second one. I don't know. But
second wave feminism.
It's a long haul, and I just want you to really look to the future and say, realistically, how long is this going to take? I know you're working hard every day, every year, every month in so many ways. So just can you look towards the future? I know this is a little bit fantastic, but I just want, what's realistic here?
Any other panelists want to take that question on?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, which I don't have like a clear answer for that. Like, especially considering the Ethiopian context, we're even going back. So the recent war and so on is like bringing so much additional problems in terms of gender. So in our context, like there is a lot that are expected to see like a major change, even to go back to the progress that you had the past 10 years and so on. Even as like most like woman who has a leadership position, most educated and so on, I daily face like major challenge in terms of this gender equality. So people do not even recognize you as a leader just by the person of being a female leader, even in the hospital. So they prefer the male nurses as compared to specialists, female specialists and so on. So there is a lot to do. We have to focus on, I think, the major issues. We have to, like, especially in Ethiopia, we have to work hard on in terms of educating the girls, because that's the foundation. Like when the girls are really educated, when they have access to these basic needs, they at least can fight. I'm not the same like the other rural women that they sometimes accept some of these inequalities. So I try to fight and like ask for my rights and so on. So it's not the same for the other woman who is in the other parts of the country. So as a country, we need really a lot to do, a lot to invest. And at least those women, those of us who are really in this leadership position should take extra steps in making sure that this really happens, because we have to set a real example. We have to play our part, okay, just to have some change in the other woman's life. So I cannot put it in years, but I just believe like in my generation, I don't think that would be really realistic, having the real context in the ground.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Felagot. Anyone else from the panel want to respond to this question? It's a difficult question, Susan, you posed to the panel.
It is. The timeline for achieving for gender equality is difficult to predict. It is, as it depends on numerous factors, the political will, cultural shifts, economic policies, is very difficult. But however, though journey to gender equality is very, very difficult, but every step we take together brings us closer to justice and empowerment for all. To achieve this, every voice, every action, and every partnership matters. And every step we take together brings us closer. So, yeah. So, and then we need a collective action.
Very well said. I wish I could have close to that. So maybe one additional question and before we close, I have a comment here from Olivia. I think it's worth mentioning. She says that very happy to hear the focus on intergenerational dialogue and solidarity, but wants to remind us of the importance that when we talk about youth, it's not enough. We should also be including children, and those are kids under 18. They have interesting and transformative perspectives to offer and leverage. I think one of the questions that I would love to just spend a couple of minutes on is, what can we do here in Canada as partners to the work that you're carrying out? What can we do better in terms of supporting you? And what elements of an equitable partnership should your Canadian partners strive to incorporate in their partnership with you? Elizabeth, can I call on you?
Yes. So let me just share my quick thoughts on this. I think one of the things that I would say as recommendations on how to support partners better to do their work is to trust the institutions to do the work. And while that looks like a very simplistic response, but sometimes you cut it, through the conversations, through the processes, that there's not enough trust in the institution to do work. So trust it. Then secondly, I think supporting, and this is for either organizations, CBOs that are either registered or coalitions that are really coming together. I think another way we could improve is supporting the core, the human resource compensation for the work that is being done. Many times you will meet sometimes partners who are supporting your work that is program project-based. The activities are well sponsored, but the human resource, the wellness of the lawyers that are handling these cases, the women that go to the police to make sure the victims get the help that they need, that core support that really grows the human resource, that keeps people, interested, that supports organizing is, for me, I think what I think Canada should support, should enhance. And then maybe thirdly, I think, and I don't know what the statistics look like right now on how Canada is funding movements, but I think there's need to take away more money from the international NGOs and remove that ladder, remove that step where institutions like ourselves at FIDA have to then apply to an international NGO here in Uganda that then will grant to us. I think that usually brings in a bit of work for institutions like ourselves to be able to do the work. So that's what I can mention right now.
That's great, Elizabeth. I think, and I think the three things that you've mentioned are at the core of, the struggle for locally led, supporting locally led initiatives, leadership. You talk about trust, you talk about supporting core programming, which is the meat and bones of organizations, rather than just project-based funding. And then you talked about removing the intermediary so that you can access direct funding, which is linked to the trust issue. Any other comments from any of the other panelists in terms of building off of what Elizabeth has said, in terms of what we can be doing here in Canada to support organizations like the ones that you're leading in your own countries? Dr. Rubel, Choppa, anything? Dr. Felagot, anything you want to add?
I don't know if, yeah, I think it'll be the same. I mean, long-term financial support for
Longer term.
organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yes, and of course, more collaborations. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Felagot, I think you've taken yourself off mute. Do you want to add anything? Oh, she's frozen again. Okay, well, I think with that, I think we're going to close this, what I think has been an incredible session, where I think, I don't know about all of you, but I feel like I learned a tremendous amount by just listening to the stories of each of the women that we had the privilege to have as panelists with us today. And I think, you know, I'll take it back as I close to some of the things that the senator talked about in terms of the moment that we're in and the importance of really in this moment more than any other moment to continue to work together, to struggle, you know, to be resilient, right? She said resilience is, she associated with suffering and with struggle. It is so important that we continue to work together, to do the work that we do day in and day out, each of one of us in our own different spaces, battling different challenges, but a lot of commonalities as well. And to do it with, in the spirit of what feminist leadership is all about, authentically, open, inclusive, and courageously. And with that, I will close off and pass it off to Kimberly, I think.
Thank you so much, Marlene. What a moment this was and is. On behalf of everybody in the OCIC community and on our team, I want to share our appreciation to Senator Senior, Marlene, Elizabeth, Dr. Rubel, Shobha, and Dr. Felagot, specifically for framing this dialogue in your own personal experience and your stories as feminist leaders in your regional and your community and your institutional context and priorities, and in your analysis of the way that these things intersect within this very rapidly changing geopolitical context that's frankly quite frightening. The last couple of hours have moved very quickly. Thank you to all that are still here that joined us at the beginning. I want to name a couple of things that stood out for me. So the first is with Senator Senior's emphasis on a feminist leadership that's characterized by humility, authenticity, transparency, and a recognition that all of our voices are needed for this transformative change, and that we must insist on lasting peace and prosperity for all. And I know, Marlene, you've just repeated these things and they've come out throughout the panel by all of you. But I think her point that we have to remind ourselves that together we can outlast the bullies. We can stand for our values and principles, and we can establish these as our mantra. So maybe, Susan, this is to your question and point as well. We can and we must. Shobha, for your examples of the way that Women for Peace and Democracy works with women's groups to support collective advocacy, to influence local policies, and to push for women's rights, and also to amplify diverse voices, especially from the most marginalized communities. We know this work personally as we've visited Shobha's work, and I can attest to all of what she has shared as truly grassroots feminist work. Elizabeth, I loved your emphasis on building movements rather than doing projects. I think we should say that again, that we are building movements and not undertaking projects, even if the projects are the basis with which the work is happening, and that we are co-creating to address systemic level issues at the grassroots. Dr. Rebel's emphasis was, for me, on the nuanced narrative on gender equality and an acknowledgement that every single story and every single voice matters. And in our sector, we often talk about the need for this new narrative. And I think sometimes it becomes very technical, and we focus on words that might not resonate with the average person in any country. So I think this point about really each person's life truly matters, and taking the time to emphasize individual stories is so important. And then Dr. Felagot, your emphasis on improving gender roles for the most disadvantaged, and then I know that you work very hard to test and then to scale innovation. And I think that has a huge impact at the country level. And we're so proud of the work that you're leading. Of course, last but not least, Marlene, we talked last week in an event that we had with OCIC members in Toronto about our superpowers, our hidden superpowers. And I think Marlene has this capacity to hold space. You began by opening up about framing what is feminist leadership and how it's evolving. And I think you've tried very hard here to hold this space despite the constraints of time and the challenges of technology, to make a space where all of the contributors here and the participants could share your ideas and your thoughts and your questions. So I speak for myself, but I'm sure it's the same for others, that it has been such a privilege to be in this space with you together. And now I have a technical job of inviting you all to do a short poll to tell us how you felt. And there it is. So we'll just pause for 1 second so each of you can complete this little poll. And as you're doing that, I just want to thank the many people behind the scenes for any of these events. So for today, to thank Senator Paulette Senior's staff, Sarah Gray and Toby Dajo, OCIC members, the Aga Khan Foundation of Canada, Canadian Feed the Children, Canadian Physicians for Aid and Relief, or CPAR, Crossroads International, the Presbyterian World Service and Development, and World Accord, for working together as a group under this shared OCIC umbrella to bring this panel together, and also for your long-term commitments to really working in feminist and transformative ways and with feminist and transformative leadership. I also want to thank the OCIC team, Shehara, Sarah, Lisa, Mishka, Negan, Pragya, and Kay, for all of their efforts in planning and coordinating this event and a number of other events for International Development Week. And also, of course, to thank Global Affairs Canada and our colleagues in the Engaging Canadians branch for their financial and logistical support to this and all of OCIC's work. Really, I thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great day ahead.